Okay, Yorick, here we are live. Fairly big, maybe concerning announcement today, right?
Yeah, I got an email this morning talking about a Tesla Powerwall 2 recall.
So we're going to talk all about that. We've known about this. It was actually yesterday that the ACCC announced it.
Yep.
We have known for a little longer than that because Tesla's been kind of really proactive. So Tesla, it's a Powerwall 2 recall.
Yeah, so specifically, this is a small subset of the Powerwall 2s that have been installed, specifically between November 2020 and June 2022.
Mm-hmm. Hey, Tak, I just realized that this light's not on. Can you work that on for us?
Yeah.
This is all a little bit sort of ad lib. We're actually getting ready for another video you might see here. We've got a whole bunch of
few exciting things happening.
Stuff everywhere.
All right. Well, I reckon once we get this light on, we'll get into it.
Yep. Okay, so we're talking. We may as well keep going. Yours. Powerwall 2. So first there was Powerwall 1 that came out 2015.
It was quite some time ago, and it was a fairly short production run on that battery.
Yeah.
And then we've got the Powerwall 2 that I personally have 2 of under my house. So maybe not in the best location, but with a recall. But no, I think at the end of the day, I'm not worried.
Yeah. So Powerwall 2, was it all of the Powerwall 2s? Because Powerwall 2 has been out for a long time, right?
Yeah, I think
7 years or something like that.
I'd say it's something in that ballpark.
So there's a lot of Powerwall 2s out there.
Correct.
Is it all of the ones, all Powerwall 2s that are getting recalled?
No. As I said, it's specifically Powerwalls that were installed between November 2020 and June 2022. But even then, it's only a small subset of those Powerwalls because my battery was installed at that time. And look, put it this way, if you are an affected unit or you own an affected Powerwall, you'd probably already know by now. So one of the things that Tesla has done really well is they've been hugely proactive with their recall. So what's essentially happened is there's been 2 cases in Australia, 5 worldwide, where a Powerwall 2 has had a thermal runaway effect. And essentially what this means, and we'll bring up a picture on the live stream, is essentially one or more of the battery cells that makes up the pack has either short-circuited or something's gone wrong internally, and it basically heat up and burn. We don't like to use the word fire. It seems it's quite a scary word, but essentially that's what's happened here in a few cases. So
yeah, so this is one picture from Facebook. So it wasn't just a little bit of smoke came out. That's it obviously has stopped at some point. It didn't burn the house down, but it's a pretty nasty burn on it, right?
Yeah, look, at the end of the day, there are multiple safety systems in these batteries, and NMC chemistry, which is in the Powerwall 2, and not like the Powerwall 3, which we have today, which is LFP chemistry, which is much more thermally stable. But I think what has been said sort of universally is the Powerwalls, even though they've had this runaway effect, when we've had multiple batteries stacked side by side, they haven't both caught alight, and the thermal runaway has actually been contained really to just that section of cells where it hasn't spread to the whole battery, so the amount of damage has been relatively small. No one's been hurt.
So let's talk the difference between NMC you're talking and LFP, which is the Powerwall 3. Oh, sorry, there's Powerwall 2 behind me. So this is just in case you're wondering. So there's 3 different looking Powerwalls. One looks like a big shield. The early days. This is the second one. This is the one we're talking about. The new one has got a glass front on it and a big T. So, if your Powerwall looks a little bit like this, you're in that. There's a small chance, or a 1% chance, that your battery is affected, right?
Yeah, so they say globally it was 1% of all the Powerwalls that were installed. We've had 3 sites that have been affected. Now, I think it's very fair to say that Tesla has already shipped us 3 of the 4 Powerwalls that need to be replaced. So it's only it's less than 10% of all our battery installs, or all our Tesla Powerwall 2 installs that have been affected.
I've got to say, they've been ridiculously proactive. We were over in China for the last week, and it was just before that they got onto it, and I didn't even know what was going on because I was sort of away during the period. A couple of guys over there had been in contact with Tesla as well about the issue, but they really got onto it quickly.
Yeah, it's nothing like the LG recall, which is still ongoing. Look, Tesla have proactively discharged all the affected units, have already contacted, as far as I know, 95% of the affected
I
customers.
think it's 99% or something.
Oh
but
yeah.
it's
They've
basically
been really
everyone.
proactive about it. And as I said, we've already received 3 of our 4 replacement units, and they're being replaced with Powerwall 2s, or they're being upgraded to Powerwall 3. So look, as I said, this is nothing like the LG recall where they didn't have a solution. Tesla have basically put an action plan in place before everybody even knew about the recall. So they've been really good on that front. You asked me a question about NMC versus LFP.
Yes, yeah.
So just a very just to jump in that really quickly, pretty much all home storage now and a lot of electric cars are now LFP chemistry or lithium iron phosphate chemistry. NMC or nickel manganese cobalt chemistry, this is found in some of the higher performance electric cars where energy density is really more important, the Powerwall 2. Now, I personally have NMC batteries at home, which is the Powerwall 2. Look, one of the big benefits of LFP chemistry today is they have a much higher activation threshold for a thermal runaway event. So while this can happen to batteries, the likelihood of the off-gassing progressing to a point where it actually catches a light is much harder for LFP chemistry versus NMC, which is what we've seen in the Powerwall 2 recall.
And I drive around an NMC battery myself.
And so do I.
So it's not a huge concern, but we have had an issue here with Powerwall 2. So, hey Yorick, you mentioned that you've got a couple of Powerwall 2s at your place.
I do. Yeah.
When I told you about it, you're like, "Oh man, really?"
Yeah. Look, I mean, my batteries are tucked up underneath my house. Now, we've done multiple videos on battery safety, and there's good reasons. And I think this is a good example why you have, there are strict fireproofing regulations. I don't think the risk is high. I mean, I'm personally not worried about it. Obviously, it's good to be well informed. And
this is the point. How do you know how do we know if your cells are not going to catch on fire?
Look, that's a really good question. So all the affected batteries now, you would have received a notification through your Tesla app. Your batteries will have been completely discharged to make them safe, and hopefully your installer, such as ourselves, or if you had it installed with another electrician, should have been in contact with you already to get that battery replaced. Yeah.
Now this is, I think potentially if there was any battery manufacturer that this could happen to, Tesla is, and I'm comparing them to BYD as well. Tesla is the best placed to handle this situation.
Yeah.
Partly because of their 4G control. Tell us about that.
Yeah, so one of the big selling points of the Tesla batteries is that they either came with a 3G dongle or in most cases a 4G dongle. So even if they're not connected to the internet or they're in a location with bad Wi-Fi reception, they still have that backup. So Tesla is able to remotely diagnose, access, again, shut down the battery in this sort of emergency
even
situation.
If they're not connected to your Wi-Fi, they are connected.
Yeah.
Tesla have control of it anyway. So they know every install. Tesla are really good with their installs. We take photos of the install afterwards. That might cover us or whatever it is.
Yeah.
They're really quite controlling, you might want to say, about their batteries. And at times like this, you're kind of glad that Tesla is, right?
Yeah. And look, they're proactive. That's, I think the key point is that, we found out 2 weeks ago that we may have had some affected units. Tesla have sent us those units, and we've already got plans to get those installed if they're not installed already. I can also talk from my own experience when I put my batteries in a couple of years ago, and I fall within that recall time frame, but I haven't received any notification, so I'm sighing a bit of a breath of relief. But one thing that I had is one of my Powerwalls was shut down. It stopped working about a month in. Tesla contacted me, and I look at my system all the time. I do this for a living. They told me that I had a fault with my battery before I realized, even though I was checking it every day. So, Tesla have been doing this proactively for quite some time.
Yeah. And so if it does come down to a replacement, here's a little bit of a bonus. It is a case-by-case basis, but they might even upgrade your Powerwall 2 to a Powerwall 3, which would be pretty schmicko, right?
Yeah, so, I mean, look, there's obviously pros and cons with both setups, but, if it decided suitable and you can go to a Powerwall 3, then you will have faster discharge rates, you'll have LFP chemistry, and probably a longer-lasting battery just because the technology's improved.
Yeah.
I think there's also another silver lining with this recall. Obviously, it's never great to have a fault with a product, but look, Tesla, all the affected batteries that Tesla are recalling will be going back to the Tesla headquarters for breakdowns. This will be a learning experience for them as well as other manufacturers. So batteries will become safer with time. The more they pull apart, we might see updates to software for better thermal management or even better monitoring of the cells as well. So if there was a likelihood that you may have a fault like this down the track, your battery might get flagged well before there's any chance of a fire potentially happening.
Yeah. Yorick, I think it's fairly prudent timing or whatever it is. Prudent's the wrong word, but we're in a battery boom in Australia, and Australia is installing so many more batteries than we were 6 months ago.
We're selling more batteries now than we are solar systems.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, we are at MC Electrical doing a lot more batteries than we're doing solar. We've always kept conservative with our batteries, so we've stuck with Powerwall and BYD.
Yep.
You and I have been testing a lot of different batteries. We're going to talk about, that's what this place is apart for at the moment, talking about the Huawei solution. Yeah,
we just came back from Huawei BYD in Shenzhen. So
we're going to test a lot more batteries as well. What do you think? I imagine it was just some no-name brand that popped up and came to Australia, and then all of a sudden, let's say Anker. Let's just Anker, the battery at your mother-in-law's place. How do you think they would respond in a situation like this?
Oh, look, I'd hope they would respond as well as Tesla have. Obviously, until something like this happens, you never really know. Now, I think Anker is probably another good example. This is another massive company with history and a lot of funds to be able to wear such a fault. We obviously don't want to name any names, but this is a risk for any manufacturer, I think, especially if it is a new product.
And I guess my point is, I think there's two things the customer would want to be thinking about is the installer that you're buying it off. Are they going to be looking after you? Are they going to be running out to replace your Powerwall? Or you're going to have to be chasing down Tesla for that or whatever it might be, and who you're buying it off. And I do think when something big happens like this, Tesla are well placed to sort it out, right?
Yeah.
Not every company is.
No, not at all. And look, it says a lot more about a company in terms of how they deal with these faults. If something does go wrong, then obviously things can go wrong with any product. I mean, Tesla is a big, well-known brand, and things do happen. They have been selling more batteries than any other manufacturer for quite some time now. They're no longer the market share. SIG Energy. I mean, look, SIG Energy and SAJ and I think it was Alpha ESS are now the top three installers. I would think that they don't quite have the same financial backing to wear a recall like this.
Yeah, exactly. The company would be in a lot more trouble, I think. So, in some ways, you would kind of think, oh, gee, maybe I was dumb to back Tesla.
I don't think you were at all.
I think it's the opposite, right? It gives me more confidence that I've backed a company that when something goes wrong. And by the way, Tesla didn't make these cells. They do make cells in these batteries. They outsource cells, and that happens fairly commonly through a lot of battery manufacturers.
Yeah, maybe I'll just quickly read a short little blurb from the actual recall. So the reason the battery has been recalled, Tesla has identified certain lithium-ion battery cells from a third-party supplier in a subset of Powerwall 2 systems that may fail and overheat. Tesla has received reports of Powerwall 2 units with the affected battery cells smoking, emitting flames, and resulting in minor property damage. Now, from what we've been told, it's 2 in all of Australia and 5 internationally. So this is what Tesla was saying, 1% of all the Powerwalls that were manufactured that are affected by this recall. So it is such a tiny proportion. And at the end of the day, there is always a risk that one of the 200 odd cells or more that are in that battery pack could have a minor short circuit or minor fault with it. And look, I think the main takeaway from this is Tesla's been proactive. I don't think you have anything to worry about. If you are affected, you probably already have been notified by Tesla, and it's being proactively recalled as an abundance of safety, as an abundance of caution.
Yeah, okay.
We've got a question?
No. Oh, we have got one question. Customers to get some new Powerwall 2s. Oh, well, let's open the door for customers to get some new Powerwall 2s. No. So Tesla do have some Powerwall 2s, I found out. We haven't been able to get them to install for our customers if they want a second one or something like that.
Yeah.
But I was talking to Tesla just before about this, and they do have enough to replace. Like, let's say in your situation, you had 2 Powerwall 2s. If one of them failed, they've got enough to replace that. They've not got enough, unfortunately, to sell me a Powerwall 2 so I can install it for you.
But that's a good thing. I mean, it's important that these manufacturers hold on to stock in the event that there is a warranty claim, or they'd probably burnt through a large portion of their reserve units to do this recall.
Yeah, they certainly will. I guess not anticipating 1% of the global fleet to have an issue. But yeah.
I'm not worried myself. Look, as I said, I've got 2 Powerwall 2s. They're underneath my house. I've got fire sheeting as per the legislation. I think if the worst was to happen, I'm still in a good place that, even though I know this is a real possibility, anybody with a modern battery with LFP chemistry is much, much less likely to have such a thermal runaway event happen.
Yeah, and that does. We did a live stream, I don't know, 6 months ago about how to install a battery correctly with fire sheeting.
Yep.
And maybe we should link down below. At some point, I'll link, like we've done up an install guide to help our installers and to help you guys, but it helps customers to understand that basically we have to keep 600 mil away from windows and appliances. If there's a habitable room inside, we have to have either a brick wall or put asbestos over your timber house or whatever. Not asbestos.
Cement for fibro cement.
So keeping those, having an installer that understands those requirements, and there's a lot of new rookie installers out there.
We've seen some absolutely shoddy installations on some of the Facebook groups.
So taking that seriously, like we have at your place,
as we do for all our customers, not just me.
You go, okay, well, if you get a little bit of smoke coming out of your battery, that's fine. We're fireproof. We've kept the regulations, the complete over-the-top regulations. And you can sleep safe at night.
I think the best takeaway from this is make sure that your battery, regardless of what brand it is, be it Tesla, BYD, SIG Energy, Anchor, or Alpha ESS, you name it. It doesn't matter. Make sure it stays connected to the internet, because if something like this was to happen, for the manufacturers to be able to proactively discharge a battery, make it safe. That is what Tesla have done really well, and I hope that they've now set the gold standard for how a battery recall is handled. LG, unfortunately, really missed the ball. I think we're still dealing with some of those warranty issues. I think the Tesla recall is almost over before we even started talking about it.
Yeah, probably.
Yeah.
Okay, just to wrap up, Yorick, in case, because I'm sure people came into this late. What are we talking about? Recall for all Tesla Powerwalls?
No, not all Tesla Powerwalls.
Don't freak out.
There's a small subset of Powerwalls that were installed between November 2020 and June 2022 that are being affected by this recall.
And it's not all of the ones installed in that time, a small percentage of them?
It's about 1% of the Powerwalls installed globally. And we've had
the Powerwall 2s installed globally.
Powerwall 2s installed globally. Out of the 50 plus installations that we've done, we've had 3 that have been affected, and they've all been, all but one has been replaced already.
Yep. Okay, great. Thanks for having a chat about that, Yorick. You actually came in today because we're going to talk a little bit more about Huawei or iStore, the iStore battery. We've just been over in China.
Yeah, we've got to see the Huawei inverter manufacturing facility. It's very exciting.
Yeah, so we won't do that live. We'll record here. The reason that I've got sort of the place pulled apart at the moment, we're going to do a deep dive in and compare the Fronius inverter to the iStore inverter.
Yeah, I see some capacitors on the table and
inductors and all fancy kind of.
Is that an arc fault test that we're going to do?
Yeah, we might burn down this room. We'll see how we go. So
I'll get the fire extinguisher at the ready. I'll pop that on here. Anyway, look, I think my final takeaway with this is, if you've affected, you should know by now. Don't panic if you have a Powerwall 2. You should be in a very safe position regardless. If you have any concerns, contact your installer. Contact us if you're one of our customers. We'll look after you if anything does go wrong. But yeah, rest assured, Tesla have got your backing and they're very safe.
Yeah, okay. Let's just, LFP do not burn, but they can explode. In Germany, one had exploded after hydrogen has come out.
Correct. Yeah. So obviously, these batteries, LFP or NMC, can have, faults and runaways. LFP generally off gases, and hydrogen is definitely something that it off gases. It's more that the activation temperature for it to have this thermal runaway effect, where it actually catches a light, is a much higher threshold for LFP versus NMC. So NMC chemistry, if it fails, is much more likely to cause a fire or have flames, whereas LFP chemistry is much more likely to just off gas and not reach a threshold or reach a temperature where it starts to burn. And actually, that was something that we got to talk about at Huawei a fair bit. I mean, I think you asked what I thought was a very clever question. With these large LFP systems for utility scale solar farms, they literally just hose them down with water and literally flood the batteries, because the main thing is just to keep them cool. So if the battery doesn't get too hot, these are relatively small battery systems, relative to these larger utility scale batteries. The likelihood that they're going to have this thermal runaway or fire is very low for LFP.
And there is no doubt, if you put a battery in your house, there is some potential hazard there.
Yeah.
So is there if you connect electricity to your house, and so is there. I was saying to you that one of my mates in the industry has got a plane, Bryn, and you're a pilot yourself, and I'm like, oh man, I don't know if I want to go up with him. And your response was,
well, it's far safer than driving. But also, look, your petrol car that's parked in your driveway,
that's a risk too.
Is far more likely to catch a light. I mean, I have a friend whose car spontaneously burst a light in the driveway and set another friend's car on fire. The likelihood of your battery catching a light.
You're freaking me out, Yorick. I think
so
I'm going to go and move to America and be Amish. Anyway,
you could fall off a horse, Mark.
That's right.
All right. Anyway, don't be afraid. It's very safe. And if you are affected by the recall, you should know by now.
Rightio. Thanks, Yoz.
Thanks, Mark. I know I waffled a bit at the end, but